This tutorial video covers everything you need to know about StagePlayer 2.0. Right now what you see is my desktop, and over here I have the StagePlayer icon, which I'm going to double click to open. When StagePlayer opens, you will have two windows. One is the controls window, over here, and one is the output window. When we're hooked up to our projector, our output window is what we will drag off of our screen and onto the projector display. However, for this tutorial, I'm going to keep both windows side by side because they're both important. The first thing you're going to do is log in. And remember that these credentials are going to be the same as the credentials you use to log into your online Broadway Media account. Ensure that you have read and agreed to the end user license agreement and terms of service, and then click Login. Once you log in, you will be brought to your show library page. In your show library, you will see your active shows. I have two shows here for the purpose of this example. One of them I've already downloaded, and one of them I have not. So if you're logging into StagePlayer for the first time, you probably will have this green download button. That's because your content needs to be downloaded and saved locally to your device. This allows you to present your show without being connected to the internet. Now you'll also notice that there's some different text on each of these rentals. So for Anastasia, it says access expires on and then a date, whereas for Mean Girls, it says watermarks removed on and then a date. So access expires, this rental, is already within our license period, and so it's telling us the day that the license will expire. However, for Mean Girls, we're not yet within the license period. We're within the rehearsal period. And so this text is telling us that the watermarks will be removed on this date, i.e. our license will start on this date. You'll also notice once this finishes downloading that for Anastasia we have a green present button, but for Mean Girls we're going to have a green preview button. Again, the difference in language on these buttons has to do with whether you're in the license period or not. So Anastasia, we're in the license period, so we can present our show, whereas Mean Girls, we are not, so we can preview our show. Now, the only difference between a show that is within the license period and a show that is not is the presence of watermarks. So if we preview Mean Girls, we can see that the Broadway Media watermark is present, and it's going to be present on any of the content that we go to. However, for Anastasia, when we present our content, there are no watermarks present. Two last things to note about the show library page. One, we have a refresh button up here. It does not depress or highlight when you click it, but it does work. And then two, if you have an issue, you can hover over the specific show that you're having the issue with and click this report issue button. This will allow you to type in a message within the software and then click this report issue button to submit it to our support team. The report issue button does not look like it's clickable, but I promise you it is. If you change your mind and no longer need to report something, you can simply click off of the box and it will go away. All right, so now let's get into how to actually present our show. So you're going to start by clicking the present button, and that will bring you to this page. So we have a couple of buttons up here at the top that I'm going to talk about first. The full screen button will make your output take over your entire screen. The output window is designed to always cover any other windows. This way, if you got a notification on your computer during the show, the notification wouldn't pop up over your animated scenery. Because of this, we do not want to click the full screen button if we have everything on one screen, because then our output window would take over our whole screen and we would no longer have access to the controls. So you only want to click the full screen button when your output window is on your projector. Next, we have a curtain warmer button. This pulls up your curtain warmer in a nice 2-second crossfade. Then we have a pause button, which pauses any animation that is happening, and then resumes it when you click resume. And then finally, an end show button. It will always double check, are you sure you want to stop presenting? If you are, you can say end show, which will bring you back to the show library and put the Broadway Media Grid back on your output window, which is why we recommend that you do not end your show until your audience has left the theater. And then if you don't want to end your show, change your mind, you can just click cancel. Next, we have these cue previews. These are still images of what cue is happening actively and what cue is coming up next. So I'm going to click this green start button to start my show. And then you can see here that the active cue is my curtain warmer and the next cue is a blackout. You'll also notice that it's color-coded, so green for active. Down here in the cue sheet, it is also green and the status is active. Orange for next. Down here in the cue sheet, it is also orange and the status is next. If you feel that these thumbnails are taking up too much of your cue sheet, you can simply collapse them here and then see more of your cue sheet. You can also re-expand them at any time. So let's talk a little bit about what a cue is. So a cue is actually made up of 2 videos, and I'm going to skip to later in the show to best present this. So I'm going to skip to this cue. And when a cue begins, this is the action video, the first video in the cue sequence. So the action video is when something unique happens. So you saw that smoke, the transition, the set coming in, that is all action. And you can see here, this action video is 24 seconds long. And once the action video finishes playing, we will automatically go into a loop video. So we didn't have to do anything to go into the loop video. It is automatic. And the loop video is an ambient background video. Nothing unique or new is happening. And it just stays on screen until your operator tells the program to go to the next cue. So in this case, our loop video is 18 seconds long and it has this billowing smoke. Now, there are 2 ways that you can go to the next cue. The first is by clicking the next button. The next button will always finish the loop video before beginning the next action video. Now, that previous cue that we saw was 18 seconds. If I had pressed it down here at 1, it would have taken a full 18 seconds before the transition began. Sometimes we need the transitions to occur more quickly than that. In that case, we have the jump to next button. Instead of waiting for the cue to finish, the jump to next button immediately goes to the next cue with a soft 2-second crossfade. So immediately we were seeing this animation come up, and the soft 2-second crossfade means that it came up seamlessly and beautifully. So these are your 2 options when running your show, and you can use whichever one works best for your show. And then finally, the last option we have here is a Blackout Now button. It immediately goes to a blackout with a soft 2-second transition. However, I do not recommend using the Blackout Now button during your show for planned blackouts. It really should only be used for emergency blackouts. You can actually edit your show and add in blackouts into your cue sheet. That's what I would recommend, and I'll show you how to do that in just a bit. All right, so just to finish up describing this page and how to present the show, down here we have the cue sheet, which I already described how the active cues are green and it's color-coded and whatnot. All of the information you need to know about running your show is present in the cue sheet. So you have your act here, your scene, your cue, a description of what is happening, and then you have the page number it happens on and the cue line where it should happen. So your operator is following along in the script and seeing, oh, this is where this exactly should happen. Certain cues do not have an exact place in the script, like this one, for example. In those cases, we say when Stage Manager is ready, and then you would decide for your particular production where those cues should fall. And then in the editing features, you can change any of these cue lines to be what you specifically want for your production. Okay, so that is how you operate StagePlayer. Now let's take a look at StagePlayer's more advanced features, such as its editing features and the rest of the software. So I'm going to start by describing this sidebar here. We have 3 lines in the sidebar that if we click will collapse the sidebar, and if we click again will expand the sidebar. And then down at the bottom we have our name, organization, and a logout button. StagePlayer will always ask you, are you sure you want to log out? And if you do, you click the logout button, and if not, you click cancel. Now let's talk about these options here. So as we know, we open up into the show library, but we can always click on these other tabs to navigate to them. So next we're going to go to the Tools tab. And I'm going to talk about what each tab offers. So we'll start with the first part of the Tools tab, which is the test patterns. This is what helps you set up your projector. So if you need something to be projected on screen, to make sure your projector is level, to make sure that the coloring is correct, that's when you would use these test patterns. If you select none, we have the default, which is the Broadway Media Grid, which is the same as if you select grid. Then we also have colors and grayscale. Next, we have a curtain warmer tab. Now, I would not recommend using this tab as it is still in development. So we're going to skip right over it. In the future, you will be able to upload a custom curtain warmer. Next is vignettes. Vignettes are kind of like a filter. If you select a vignette, it will apply to every cue in the show. So to select a vignette, you can click on Preset Vignettes and then select the one that you want. You can only have one selected at a time, or you can upload your own custom vignette by clicking this Upload button. Let me show you what a vignette looks like. So we have Vignette A selected, and then if I go to my show and present it, let's go to a scene where we can really see it. If you look at the thumbnail, you can see that much more of the scene is being covered by the vignette. So it's just a personal preference. Some people like to use the vignette to avoid harsh lines, but it's absolutely up to you. If you decide you don't want a vignette, you just click none. Next, we have masks. I'm also not going to cover masks in this video because this is another feature that is still in development and not 100% operational. Next, we have a section called Watermark. This allows you to upload your own watermark to the content. Again, you would do that by clicking the Upload button, and you can change the opacity, so how opaque or not the watermark is, with this slider. So the more you slide it to the right, the darker the watermark is going to be. The more you slide it to the left, the lighter the watermark is going to be. And then finally, we have a shortcuts page. As you saw, when you operate the projections, you do so with a mouse by clicking the next button or the jump to next button. But some people prefer to use shortcuts instead. Here are our preset shortcuts, but you can absolutely change these shortcuts to be whatever works best for your production. To change a shortcut, you simply click on the Change button, and then that's going to say Enter Shortcut, and you're going to enter the shortcut that you want by clicking on it on your keyboard. So all I did in this instance was I liked that it had the N key for next, but I didn't want to have to click Shift and N to go next. I just wanted to click N. So I changed it to just be N. Spacebar and Enter are not viable shortcut options at the moment, and neither are number keys, but all letter keys are, as is the Shift button and the Option button. So those are all of our tools. Next, I'm going to cover the application settings. So when you open the Application Settings tab, you are brought to the General page. First, we have our account. It tells you exactly what email address you're logged in with and has a Reset Password button. If you click the Reset Password button, you will be sent an email with instructions on how to reset your password. Next, we have the version. I am on the latest version as of the time of this recording. You can check to see if you're on the latest version by clicking this Check for Update button. If nothing happens, that means you're on the latest version. The next option is Downgrade Version. We sometimes downgrade you to a different version of StagePlayer if you're having particular issues that might be related to the hardware that you're using. I would not recommend downgrading StagePlayer unless you are told to do so by a member of our support team. Speaking of support, Here is another way that you can contact support by clicking this Submit Ticket button, and that will actually open up a support ticket in your browser, so it will take you out of the StagePlayer software. And then finally, change language. StagePlayer is available currently in English or German. The next section is outputs. As you know, we have our main output right here, and this output must always be open and cannot be closed. However, let's say that we have two projectors. One of them is upstage, one of them is downstage. We have curtains that come in and out, and sometimes we want our scenic projections to show up on the first projector. Sometimes we want them to show up on the second projector. In that case, we need another output. So we're going to prepare another output window. So now I have two outputs. You can prepare up to 5 outputs. And then we also have an option for virtual outputs. However, virtual outputs is still in development and not a feature I recommend relying on. You would use a virtual output if you were trying to blend two projectors together. But you'll have to wait for StagePlayer 3.0 for that feature to be fully active. So we will come back to outputs to talk a little bit about how you get cues to show up on your two different outputs later in this video. For now, I'm going to close my second output. The next option we have is display. All of our content is designed in a 16:9 aspect ratio. Sometimes your screen or your projector will be different dimensions than that 16:9 design. We do not recommend changing your display because it can cause glitching or distortion. However, the option is here for you to play around with if you would like. So automatically, we are always going to be by default in constrain and with 0% zoom. Stretch to fit will stretch the image to fit the size of your output window. So let me go to the content to show you what that looks like. So as you can see, the content is now stretched. It's not constrained. It's stretched to fill the whole output window. If I were to scale, that would make the content fill the whole output window without stretch. So in this case, it is zoomed in. So you're missing some of the content, but it looks a little less distorted. And then you can use the zoom options to play around with what part of the content you want to show up. So if you drag this little ball to the left, that zooms out. And if you drag it to the right, it zooms in. And then down here, this tells you where the pinpoint of the zoom is. So if I zoom this out to really show us, I can pin it to the top, left, right, bottom, and that shows you where it's going to be pinned as you zoom. All right, so let's take this back to normal. Our next option is sound. The vast majority of our projections packages do not contain sound. We have a few that do. For example, Young Frankenstein. In this case, you can enable the sound by checking the box, or simply keep it unchecked if you do not want the sound enabled. And then finally, we have our advanced settings. The first option in the advanced setting is Enable Light Mode. If you notice that your projections are glitching or lagging, one troubleshooting step is to enable light mode. This allows your projections to be processed with less processing speed. Enable legacy rendering is similar, especially if you have older hardware. Enabling the legacy rendering could alleviate some of the glitching and lagging. You can absolutely take these troubleshooting steps on your own, or you can reach out to a support person and see if we recommend taking these troubleshooting steps. The next option we have is debug mode. If you enable debug mode, it's going to open the developer console. It will also change your output. So if I just present my show, let's go to Q where you can really see everything. you'll see that there's a little bit of information here about what's happening. So these tools are really helpful for our support team if we can't figure out why you're experiencing an issue. So the only instance in which you would enable debug mode is if someone from our support team had reached out to you and told you to enable it to help them resolve the issue that you're having. Next, we have our QLab incoming port and our QLab outgoing port. We're going to ignore these. You only need to know these if you have a professional license and are using QLab. And if you're using QLab, you're probably not watching this video about StagePlayer. Okay, and then the final option we have here is clear cache. You would do so by clicking this button, though it does not look clickable. I can promise you it is. And the only thing to be aware of is that clearing your cache will delete all of the files from where they are stored locally on your device. So you do not want to clear your cache unless you have finished your production. Otherwise, you will need to re-download your show and you will lose any edits you have made. I actually only recommend clearing your cache, like I said, after a production is finished or if a support person tells you that you need to. The next tab we have is Profile. This again shows you what account you're logged in with. We have that same password reset button, and we have another logout button that operates the same as the one down here. The final section is the computer performance section. This is another section that is in development, and I'm going to tell you to ignore for now. There is a chance that if you request support for your show, a support person may ask for a screenshot of this page, but it is not 100% developed yet and still experiences some issues, as you can see on my screen right here. So we're going to primarily ignore this page for now. And then finally, we have a support button here. This is not a tab, but just a button. If you click it, it opens up the help ticket form in an external browser. Okay, so that's a little bit about StagePlayer settings. Now we're going to talk about our show-specific settings. And in fact, I don't think I actually discussed these 4 buttons, so we're going to talk about them too. Present your show, of course, presents your show. Delete will delete your show. That just deletes all the files from where they're saved locally. If you had to move computers, you could delete them from your current device and move to the second device, as we have a 1 computer at a time policy. The reset button resets your show. So if I've made any edits to my show, I click reset and all of a sudden I'm back to the default. And then show settings is what we're going to focus on for the rest of this video. These are your editing options. This first page here, we have a couple of plug and play editing options. The first are blackout options. We can choose to have blackouts at the end of acts, scenes, after the curtain warmer, or none of the above. I'm going to show you how you can add a blackout exactly where you want it, so I would recommend not even using the plug and play options, but it's absolutely up to you. Next, we have the animation option to bypass the action video restriction, and we're going to talk about that later once we get into edit cues. And then finally, we have the curtain warmer settings, which shows exactly where the curtain warmer shows up. You can choose for it to always show up pre-show or at the end of each act. And again, these are plug and play. You can decide exactly where you want your curtain warmer in the Edit Cues button. And then down here, this curtain warmer selection, this is another feature that is in development and I don't recommend using because it's not 100% accurate. Before we get into Edit Cues, let's talk about Configure Displays. This is where you can decide what output you would like your display to show up on. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my outputs. Let's prepare that secondary output again. Library, back to Configure Displays. And let's say I want the very first cue to show up only on output 1. I want the second one to show up only on output 2. I want the third one to show up on all outputs. And I want the fourth one to not show up at all. Let's just say that's what I've decided. Save and exit. Now, when I present my show, as you can see, this is the curtain warmer, so we're going to skip to the ones that I edited, which was the first cue. First cue shows up only on the first output. Second cue shows up only on the second output. Third cue shows up on both. And the next cue shows up on neither. So that is what the multiple outputs is all about. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and disable my multiple outputs again just for the sake of this video. All right, and now let's get into edit cues. This page is an editable version of your cue sheet. Let's start again by discussing the buttons at the top. Cancel will discard all your changes and bring you back to the show library. Save will save your changes. Save and exit will bring you back to the show library. Export cue sheet will export the cue sheet in whatever state it's in. So if I export it right now before I've made any edits, I'm going to get the default cue sheet. But as soon as I start making edits, when I export my cue sheet, those edits are going to be exported with the cue sheet. So the cue sheet is always going to be up to date to your most recent edits. And then finally, we have a sync with web button. This is another feature that is in development, and I'm going to ask you to ignore for now. Now, below those buttons, we can see on the right, we have this sidebar that shows us the active cue and the next cue. We can start our show at any time, and we can navigate through the cues the same way we would in present mode by clicking the next or jump to next button. And then the bulk of this page is the cue sheet itself. We can make edits to the cue sheet on the act, scene, and cue levels. So let's start on the act level. When I hover over the act that I want to edit, I can click and drag to move the position of the act. So in this case, I would just be dragging this into behind Act 2. So that's really my only option here, but it's there if you want it. And then we have the three dots. The three dots will open up another menu. The first option is disable, so we can disable an entire act. And then if we change our mind, we can re-enable it. If we disable it and we click out of this menu, you can just click on the little I with a cross through it, and that will open up the menu again and allow you to enable it once more. You can also duplicate the act, or you can add filters to the entire act. Next, we have the scene level. So as with the act, the functionality is the same. You can use these two lines to click and drag, so we could drag scene 1 into the scene 2 position or whatnot. And then the three dots will open up a broader menu. We can disable an entire scene, re-enable an entire scene, duplicate it, add a new cue, or filters. Filters is the same functionality as before, only this time whatever changes you make apply to the entire scene, not the entire act. After you've made your changes, you can click Save and Override to apply it, or Reset to bring it back to what it was before. And then let's go back and talk about these new cues. There are three different kinds of cues you can add in: a blackout cue, a curtain warmer cue, and a camera cue. I'm going to click each one of these. And in doing so, I have created these cues at the bottom of my scene. And you can click and drag them wherever you want in the scene. They just always populate at the bottom so you know where they're going. So the first cue that I've added in is a blackout. So I'll show you that. The next one is the curtain warmer. And then finally, we have the camera cue. The camera cue is always going to default to your computer's default camera. So if you need to change the camera that you are going to, then you are going to change that within your computer's settings, not StagePlayer's settings. All right, so now that we've discussed all of the new cues, let's talk about cues themselves. So once again, the functionality is going to be the same. You hover over whatever cue you want, and you're going to have two lines on the left that let you click and drag your cue. And then you're going to have three dots which open a broader menu. You can only click and drag your cue within the scene. You can't drag it without the scene, but don't worry, the menu accounts for that. So let's go back to the menu. First, we have cue next jump 2. You've seen me use this a lot already. This is just how we get it to display on our output window. Then, as before, we can disable or re-enable a cue. We can duplicate it. As I said, we have more move functionality. So if you want to move a cue outside of the scene it's in, I'm going to scroll down so you can see it a bit better. For example, let's take our camera cue and let's move it into scene 2. And let's say I want it to occur at the very bottom of scene 2. I'm going to hover over the cue that I want to move, click move. We're going to have it happen after Act 1, Scene 2, fade to black. So that's the last cue there. Click move. And as you can see, my camera cue is no longer here. It's down here. All right, going back to the menu, we can also edit the description, page number, and cue line. All of these have the same functionality. Let's, for example, say that I changed my mind. I don't want this to occur on page 1. I want it to occur on page 3. I click edit, and as you can see, it now says page 3. And since I've changed the page number, it's probably going to be a different line. In fact, I want it to line up with my lighting cue 5. So that's what I'm going to change that to say. Edit. Now you can see it happens on page 3 with lighting cue 5. Next, we have filters. Functionality is the same. And transitions. As you can see, this menu shows us the action video and the loop video, and we're able to edit both of them independently. The first option we have for the transition options has to do with whether you have the default, which is the soft 2-second crossfade, or a hard cut. So in this case, this is only applicable to the action video, and it determines when you're coming from the video beforehand. When you go into the action video, is it going to be that default soft 2-second crossfade, or is it going to be a true hard cut? That's your first option. Next, we have action video retiming and loop video retiming. This is how we retime the action or loop video independently of one another. You can see both of these videos are at the default speed, so 1 times. Say I want to make the action video faster or slower. I would take this ball and drag it the direction that I want. So I would drag it to the left to make it faster, and I would drag it to the right to make it slower. Then as you can see, the duration and speed change automatically as I move the ball. So for example, let's put it here. I can now see that the duration is less than a second, it's 0.45 seconds, and it's 12 times the original speed. And then the loop video functionality works exactly the same way. So you can play around and find the length of the transitions, the lengths of the videos that work best for your production. Finally, we have the effects menu, which we're going to ignore for now because it's still in development. And then I promised I would tell you one more thing, which was about the bypass action video. What does that even mean? Well, you'll notice here that this little emergency icon has popped up on a couple of our cues. This is because we have moved these cues out of order. When you move a cue out of order, the action video, that transition, it probably no longer applies because the cue is not coming from where it originally came from. So sequentially, it doesn't make sense anymore. In this case, StagePlayer knows to disable the action video. It knows that the action video no longer makes sequential sense. In rare cases, you might decide you want the action video to happen anyway. In that case, you would simply click the bypass restriction button. Now, clicking this button will take you out of the edit cues page. So we're going to want to make sure that we save any edits we have made before we exit. Because when you click the bypass restriction button, it takes you right here. Animation options, bypass action video restriction. So again, if I decide I want the action videos to happen even though they don't make sequential sense, I'm going to go ahead and bypass the restriction. And that is everything you need to know about StagePlayer 2.0. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to our support team by calling 1-800 277-0343, or emailing us at help, that's HELP, at broadwaymedia.com. Thanks again.